Why not join the Men Talking conversation?
As a black man, you're under more pressure than the average person. Every single day, you step out in the street, you're under more pressure, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, in your identity, than most people. That in itself will mitigate toward mental ill health.
It's a safe space for men to discuss issues and challenges, but also a space for men to build and uplift.
When I hear the talk, oh, why don't we do like the Indian guys, or why don't we do like the Jewish guys, or whatever, and then I don't think it's an equivalency that we can make, because there are other systemic things in place that they tagged onto earlier than we did. So I don't know, I think we can get really frustrated if we try and index ourselves to them.
I've seen my dad's story. It didn't always look pretty, but it did instill in me values.
To join the conversation, visit fatherfigure.org.uk, select Men Talking and follow the instructions. Men Talking, where men talk. Why not join the Men?
Meet Sean. He's been unfairly denied access to his daughter. Sean really doesn't know what to do. Eventually, Sean contacts family lawyers who say they can help, but it will cost £200 per hour. Sean really can't afford these rates, and he's back to square one. Sitting in his car, Sean switches on the radio and hears an advert for an organisation who provide unique specialist support for fathers that find themselves in this exact situation, and for a fraction of the price he was quoted. Sean uses his phone and goes straight online and books himself a free consultation at www.fatherfigure.org.uk. Fatherfigure supported Sean with all his paperwork. They accompanied him to court and even negotiated with the respondent and their solicitors. 9 months later, Sean is a much happier man as he and his daughter have been reunited. Why don't you do what Sean did and book a free consultation now at www.fatherfigure.org.uk. It might just change your life.
Welcome to Sable Ascent. We are a global black community of businesses, nonprofits, and consumers, exchanging a digital token to empower our community and obliterate poverty. It doesn't matter where you are or what you do, you can transact Sable Ascent tokens in our global ecosystem and marketplace. In today's global economy, we have moved from a paper society to a digital society. The time is now. Be a part of the new digital world of Sable Ascent.
Welcome to the live book show, the first of many. My name is Rose Blaze. I'm the author of Truthingdom and Shadow. I am hosting this live book show so that you, the reader, can learn messages from the authors, publications which I'm hosting on this particular show. I'm wanting to introduce my first guest panelist, Official. She's an international songwriter, social activist, humanitarian, socialite, and an avid book reader. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Rose.
Okay. And now I would like to introduce my main guest, our author for this evening, Tamara Gabriel. Tamara.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tamara. Author of From Rehab to Life. Right, so can we just go straight in, Tamara, and just ask you about your childhood so that the reader and the audience has an understanding of who you are?
Well, I had the privilege and pleasure and the greatest honor to be born in Dominica. It was heaven for me. I had a privileged life there, and I was abruptly taken away to go to join my parents in England, and that left me feeling rather, how could you call it? I felt as though I was uprooted from where I was, and it was very painful, but I got here and things just seemed to get worse. You know, it was like a descent into hell, basically.
Right.
And it was just one episode after another, violent father, racism I had to face at the same time. And it was just like a prison sentence. It was very hard work, very much. I became the maid instead of being the one who had maids who took me to school. Now I was cleaning and scrubbing and ironing and making bottles and changing nappies. And eventually my father had enough of me and sabotaged my education, took me away from school at the time when I was eligible. I was looking at a university place as I completed my exam successfully, and and I descended even further. After being ejected from the house, I ended up living on my own at 16 and having to fend for myself with rent in arrears. I thought, well, I'll just commit one crime that will sort out the rent, and then I'll get right back on track and do something legal. But it didn't work out that way, and the descent continued until I served several imprisonments. And
let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. One thing I noted from the very first opening chapters of the book, you had talked very much about the different class distinctions as well, between being at home and then being here in Britain. So could you talk to us a little bit more about the class distinction? I mean, you came to Britain, you were in a place in Dominica where you saw yourself reflected. You came to Britain, you came at a time when, in and around, not long after the Windrush, so you came at a time when you faced the racism at school. Could you talk to us a little bit more about the racism that you faced when you came to this country?
Yeah, the racism, I thought people were crazy, actually, because children were calling me nigger and wog at school for weeks, or was it months? And I just used to laugh. I just used to laugh because I was brought up to respect everybody. And by my grandma, Valerie, and the fact was that I was taught also not to laugh at children or elders or anything like that if they had a disability, like being blind or hopping on one leg or whatever. So with those principles, spiritual principles, it didn't make until a friend of mine said to me in school, they are disrespecting you, to put it mildly. And from that day, I just responded by telling them that, well, that I remember when they called me chocolate bar, I said, well, you're Milky Bar. You know, that sort of, you know, that, all that
so
sort of juvenile
quite
stuff.
an interesting way to kind of deal with it, to sort of minimize it. So and then you started speaking to us about, you know, your relationship with your father, which was really, really challenging, because I understand that, you know, things were very difficult. You know, there was a lot of physical abuse.
A lot of
and your mother suffered physical abuse as well.
Absolutely.
So can you talk to us a little bit more about, you know, about the experiences?
Well, I was completely afraid of my father. I found him to be a deranged man. I couldn't understand why am I getting beaten nearly every day. I was happy when we had visitors because that means I escaped the beating, but then he'd say, don't you think you're going to get it later? You know, so it was like that. I was eggshells. I felt I was on the wrong planet with the wrong parents. I don't know how the hell did I end up in this situation. And, you know, and on top of that, really, I suffered fights with racist boys in school with knives and stuff like that. So then having to go through all that with my father as well, it was just too much.
And then there was a disparity between the way you were raised, you and your older sister, and your two younger sisters that was born in the UK.
Yes,
all of this couldn't get any worse, could it?
I couldn't believe it. My mother said, don't call me Mom, call me Jean. And hold on a minute. And so that was like a
And
barrier
you were
was
quite
lifted
young. How
straight
old were
away.
you?
7.
7 years old.
7, yes.
Wow.
And my father insisted on calling him Dad, but however, it was soon we all noticed, Glenn and my sister Verena, who came with us, my mother and I, our grandma and I from the Caribbean, we noticed that Heather and Sandra were being treated differently. They were treated like royalty, and we were treated like invaders, like illegal immigrants or something, you know.
And then I recall reading that at one point the abuse was so bad with your dad, you know, he then didn't want you in the house at the age of 16 because he thought, actually, this boy might want to hit me back. This boy might actually, And so I understand that you had to leave the house and live by yourself at the age of 16.
Yes, halfway through my 7 O levels and 3 A levels, yes.
Can you imagine? And in hindsight, a 16-year-old, even in this day and age, Claire, isn't able to cope. Isn't able to cope. So tell us a bit more now about crime, crime and how that came about.
Yes, well, crime came about through desperation and through pride. I had so much pride, I didn't ask for help. If I asked Mammy for help, she would have paid my rent arrears. Or if I'd asked my mother for help, she would have paid it. Probably even if I asked my father for help, he might have paid it too, coming to think about it, because of that pride thing. You know, I'm away from his house now, so, you know, I could have asked my uncle. I could have, you know.
But at the age of 16, how much common sense would you think a 16-year-old would have, you know, to be able to plan one's life, to be able to budget on one's own, to be able to cope as a grown-up might? So although you say you could have asked for help, at the age of 16...
Well, actually, I felt different from most 16-year-olds because from the age of 7, I had to change nappies. I was taught to change nappies, make bottles for my little sister, baby sister Sandra, and did all the chores, whether it was cooking, cleaning. I learned to gut and season fish and scale it and all that sort of seasoned meat. And I learned to bake, to cook, make soups, all sorts of things. Learned all the different, what do you call it? Different flavorings for the food, or should I call it, you know, different, what's that word?
Seasoning.
Seasoning, that's right, for the food, you know, and so forth. And laundering, doing the back garden, cleaning the windows. So and I was taught about a budget from very early.
Looking back, would you say that you're grateful that you were able to learn those very valuable life skills? Because I would imagine if you've been doing it from such an early age, even though it can be looked upon as, you know, it's something that maybe children shouldn't be doing at that age, but when you then lived by yourself, I would imagine that those skills came in very useful.
Very, very, very useful. People thought I had a woman living with me, and she was doing all the cleaning and tidying. Everything was spick and span. Absolutely. Yeah. So it held me in good stead in that. I was grateful for that.
Yes. So
it prepared me for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Tamara, where did this then lead you to crime?
It led me to crime because I ended up with 6 weeks' rent to pay in arrears. And I got really worried about that, fearful about it. And I was asking myself, where am I going to get this money? I don't have a job. I didn't even know about signing on or anything like that.
So what happened?
So I just thought, well, I was with a friend who's called Titus. He came to live with me in the flat for a while. I let him stay there. He was a criminal already, so that was, so straight away I started thinking on criminal lines now.
Influence.
I said, Titus, how can we make some money? We need to pay the rent. And he said to me, well, you're the brainy, you're the academic one from school. What, you know, what do you think? You're the brains. So I said, well, we go where the money is and we rob it. And we take it. And so that's how it started. And yeah.
So it was for survival?
For survival, yes. And it was only to do it just once. It wasn't to continue in a way of life, to continue as a way of life. No, it was just the once. That's what I said to myself.
And then was it just where crime was now a way of life and it was continuing, and then finally you were at some point involved with the law and the criminal system?
Absolutely.
So tell us, give us some, idea about how that came about.
Well, I believe that I got addicted to quick money.
Okay.
It's, people would call it easy, but it wasn't really easy, really. Yes, quick money, instant money. You need some money. It's going to get some money over there, poop, and go home and count the money. You know what I'm saying? Yes.
And you were able to pay the rent?
Yeah, and pay the rent and, and all that, and have a party, because as far as I'm concerned, I was so depressed and so hindered as a child. No, I need to enjoy life, you know. So bought myself a crate of whiskey and things like that, and an ounce of ganja, and and started to look for clubs every night of the week to go and dance and dance my blues away.
Dance your blues away. And I suppose then I'm thinking about a process of how then did the addictive behavior start in terms of the drugs. How did that then start? How did that tell us a little bit about that process?
Well, that's very insidious, and how one crosses over the line, an invisible line from from being not an addict to becoming an addict, a non-addict to an addict, and it's a very insidious line. And for me, it was a compilation, a cacophony, of things that accumulated in my life over a period of time from childhood. I trace it back to the feeling of being rejected when my parents first left me in Dominica. And
abandonment.
Yeah, a feeling of abandonment, exactly, that's right. And from then on, it just, all these different disappointments with my father, and then getting into trouble with the law, and seeing my whole life taken away, where I was being university studying law. Here I was a criminal instead. All these things played on me, and eventually one disaster after another, and with my pride and the anger, I was driven with anger underneath, and there was a pride that went with it to, say, hey, I'm all right, I'm doing good, but really I'm lying, but
suppressed emotions.
Suppressed emotions, absolutely. Putting up a front, it just didn't. So all that stress over the years, after a while, it eventually developed into depression.
Right.
And, failed marriage and this and that. Depression just came in, and
so your relationship with your parents, especially your mother, not being able to call her mum, how would you say that affected you with being able to connect emotionally to your adult relationships?
Absolutely. Well, I went into relationships fearfully. I always wondered, how long will this relationship last?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I was afraid to ask young ladies to go out with me. Although I look like this, Jack the Lad and all that, but really, I was petrified in case they'd say no, because then it takes me back to that barrier, that invisible barrier that was created from the fact that my mother said, "Don't call me Jean, call me Mom, call me Jean."
Yeah.
And I felt I could never get through that barrier, and so it stayed with me in relationships.
Did it affect you within showing affection as well, just in case you then received that rejection?
Absolutely.
So you protected yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love was a word that sort of tried to keep away from that word.
But at the same time, I'm imagining that you were deeply craving it, and you probably had so much of it to give, but that fear of giving it and then the person not reciprocating it or cherishing it, I would imagine, was difficult.
Oh my, you're spot on. You're spot on, absolutely. Have you been there yourself?
That's a talk for another day.
Yes, okay.
Okay, okay, and this is the whole point of, you know, a review like this, because then the reader, the audience, gets to understand what it is that you're going through. They learn lessons from it. They see the messages in what you're saying.
Yes.
So, having said that, you know, leading on from what Prolific was saying, I would ask you then. So, when did you start to want to mask all of this pain? When did you recognize that, you know, these drugs were becoming, you were addicted to drugs? When did you realize this?
Well, I realized it when all of a sudden I stopped praying, because I prayed every day. I realized it when in the morning, my curtains were still drawn. And I realized it when all of a sudden I wasn't interested in business anymore. I wasn't interested in making money anymore. All I wanted to do was stay indoors or go to someone else's house and stay in there for days on end, just drinking and snorting cocaine and later on smoking crack.
Wow.
And that was it.
And that was it. And then from what I recall reading, there was then the impact on the family. There was then the impact on the family.
Could I just go back to the transition, though, from suppressing the pain via alcohol and then it going to cocaine, to then that transition to crack cocaine, because there is a that's a leap.
Yeah.
Even though, how do you go from? I mean, did you know anyone around you? Did you have anyone around you that was taking crack cocaine? Because the addiction is so much different from the two.
Yes, the addiction with crack is instant, virtually instant, whereas the addiction with snorting cocaine takes a while. It grows on you, but you get there, and no doubt it takes you to the same place, actually. It's just a slower process, and it depends on the nature of the person, but the fact is that the pain got so intense, it's so unbearable, and I couldn't sleep at nights, and so I self-medicated. I went into denial. You know, after the doctor said you're chronically depressed, I denied it, and I rejected his pharmaceutical drugs, antidepressants, and I thought I was coping the best I could. I thought, well, I'll give it up at any time, but then suddenly I noticed that I couldn't give it up.
So in fact, you were addicted to the escapism.
Yes, I was addicted to escaping the pain.
Yeah,
absolutely. I felt compelled. I felt a compulsion to run away from the pain rather than face it, and I felt a compulsion not to feel. Didn't want to feel, was running away from my feelings. You know?
And not wanting to move away from there. Because again, Prolific, you raise a really good point there. It's about the impact now, all of this compounding situation on your family. You had a failed marriage, you had children.
Yes.
In your view, what was the impact on your wife, if you were still married at that time, and the children?
Well, I mean, my wife didn't love me, so that didn't affect her much. I mean, however, I guess it affected her to the extent that I guess she was surprised that I probably left when I did, but I told her I would leave if nothing improved. And but the devastation that of that act that I felt on my children, towards my children, I felt their pain. In the thrall of crack and cocaine and alcohol, I could hear their voices calling me, little tiny voice saying, "Daddy, Daddy." And I wept buckets, Yes, and drank gallons of alcohol.
Is this whilst you were living with the children, or?
No, this is after I left them. That was very, very, very painful, because having had 2 other failed relationships where mothers were involved and children were involved that I fathered, I thought, well, at least this time now,
Yes.
I'm getting married to really hold on to this, and marrying will make a difference. But it didn't make any difference.
Could I ask you why you say that your wife didn't love you?
Because I found her crying on the day we got married at the reception. I found her crying, and I said, oh, I thought she was weeping tears of joy of being married. And I said, what's the matter? You know, and she said to me, oh, if Glenn, you know, she would still help her ex-boyfriend Glenn if he ever needed help and stuff like that. And he was the man who actually was very violent towards her, fractured her skull, cut her with a knife. He's the one who exhausted her bank account that had £250,000 in there, and now it was empty. And now when he left, she had no money. The house was up for repossession, you know, because she rather give him the money to go and buy drugs than to keep the house over the roof over her head and her children's head, because she had 3 teenage children, more or less, when I met her. You know, and so really and truly, I realized, well, this woman is not in love with me. She's weeping for another man at our marriage. And I wanted to leave instantly, actually. And however, our voice said, no, don't rush, give it a couple of months. And if it, you know, if it still feels like this, if you don't see any improvement, go. And when I decided to go, I went to say, I'm leaving tomorrow. And she said, before I could say that, she's pregnant. And so I felt compelled to stay.
Wow. So, okay, so just trying to move on a bit because of time and because we want to get everything in.
Absolutely.
So, the first rehab experience, could you take us to that point?
Oh, the first rehab experience, I went to rehab straight from prison. And
so was it conditional or was it out of choice? It was something that you were ready to do?
It was out of choice, actually, out of choice. And I had been offered before by the courts, but I refused. I said, no, I'm not an addict. I don't need no help. But now
you recognized you did.
My ego was deflated. I was humbled, homeless, no family, no friends, no money, nothing. I said, God help me.
So take us to that day when you were in the prison cell.
Yes.
And you had that breakdown, you had that realization. Describe that moment to us.
Well, that moment was like this. What do you call a moment of clarity? And I just got down on my knees and I said, God, have mercy on my soul. I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. I've never admitted it before, but I need your help. I thought I could handle this by myself. I thought I could let it go anytime I chose, but God, I need your help. And as I got off my knees, before I could sit on the single bed in the cell, prison officer came to the door and asked me if I wanted to go to an AA meeting.
Okay, so there was that acceptance.
Yes, there was that acceptance. Right. We admitted that we were powerless over drugs and alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. That is step one.
And then you asked for divine intervention.
That's right.
Yeah,
I believed that God would restore me to sanity, and God came and started the restoration process.
Yeah. Wow.
Straight away.
Yeah.
I said, look at that, God has answered my prayers just like that. Yeah, miraculously.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now fast forward to your first AA meeting, just so again the reader will have an understanding of what that was like.
Wow, AA meeting is full of love. Full of love.
Really?
You know, the newcomer is the most important person in the room. And some people, they don't want to become an old comer because they start getting ignored and they miss that attention that they got. It's lovely. They say, we will love you until you love yourself. You know, that is the motto.
And from what I read, you just listened for the first time you went. You didn't
just listen.
You didn't speak and
I didn't speak. I didn't speak. I just listened. Yeah.
You just listened. And the second time?
And the second time, well, I began to speak. I shared. I said, well, you know, I'm in rehab and I'm grateful to be here and thank you for all the support and I'm being encouraged and And I'm just grateful, and I hope that I'll carry on being sober for the rest of my life.
And then
clean.
what happened? Did Prem happen at this point?
Prem came a little later when I
Okay.
moved to second stage rehab from the
Okay.
first 3 months. Then we went into the second stage, from which
Right.
we would be rehoused from there, and going to Prem's house to recover my book that I'd started and some poems and other writings.
And which book was this? Was this Born of Rape?
Born of Rape, yes.
Okay. Which is
Born
another
of
book you
Rape.
started writing.
Yes.
And then what happened?
When I got there, Prem said he hasn't, there's no book here, and so on and so forth, and he disappeared.
Right.
And I wanted to leave, so I waited. I thought I'm waiting for him to come back
So you can
out,
go.
and then I'll just tell him my goodbyes. Anyway, instead, I heard a voice of Prem call me from the other room and say, "Hey V," you know, and I knew what he was calling me for, actually. And I went in the room, and he offered me a pipe, crack pipe. And I smoked it without any resistance. And then I had a drink after that, and I felt like crap. I felt devastated with myself.
And then talk to us about how that jeopardized your placement, you know, in terms of the home, the rehab home that you were staying at, the halfway house.
Well, after discovering coke in my system through urine test, and because they saw me going in and out of the house, it wasn't a hostel, it was a really lovely, beautiful house. And anyway, I was brought for a urine test, and it turned out to have cocaine, and I was ejected from the house instantly.
And I'm going to stop you there because I'm going to read Alcoholic, which is a poem that you wrote at that particular time.
Yes.
I recall in the book this standing out. I woke up in the morning, craving for a drink, reached out for the alcohol instead of the bathroom sink, drank plenty water with raw lemons, and ate a lot of garlic to detoxify. My heart said, "You're an alcoholic." My mind said, "It's a lie."
It's a lie, indeed, yes. In fact, the original thing goes, my heart said, my mind said, "No, it's a lie." Yes, yes, yes.
And so, again, I'm going to bring you fast forward because there's lots of other questions that myself and Prolific will want to ask you. So I'm going to bring you right up now, because of time again, to the time when you had successfully completed rehab. And from what I recall in the book, steps 11 and 12, you really found poignance and you really remember, and then it helped you in your journey to recovery.
Absolutely.
So talk to us about, you know, that last stage recovery and how that portion of the 12 steps helped you.
Yes, well, so through prayer and meditation to improve conscious contact with God as I understood God to be, you know, and having had a spiritual awakening, you know, decided to carry this message to other alcoholics and drug addicts, you know, in a bit to help them recover. But it's not guaranteed just because I've been to rehab and so on. A lot of people don't practice these steps, like step 11, pray and meditate, seeking God's guidance and help. What shall I do? Where shall I go? And all that sort of thing. And they don't carry the message either, but it's something for me I felt a burning desire to do. I felt it was my duty, and I felt driven to do so. I felt compelled, and it was a delight to do so. You know, it wasn't hard work. You know what I mean? It seemed a natural thing to do. I've just been lifted up out of the pit. Boy, now I'm out of the pit, I can send the rope down and say, "Oh, yeah, do you want to come up? Okay, come on. I've got you. Be strong, be brave, don't look back. Just keep coming up." Yes.
Absolutely. And the rites of passage that you exercised when you came here tonight, you lit the candle for the ancestors.
Absolutely.
So you wanted, you know, to bring the right feel and experience here this evening.
Yes.
So you're on the road to recovery. Now you're on the road to recovery. I'm still in the book, by the way.
Yes.
And was there ever a time when you felt, I'm never going back there? What, you know, at what point did you feel, I'm now at the top, pulling others up with the rope? When did you realize that you were never going back?
I realized I'm never going back through prayer and meditation. I was in the woods.
Again.
And I just, you know, because I meditated in the woods nearly every day for about 9 years.
Wow.
Something like that. You know, I didn't work or anything like that. I forgot about money. I just wanted to focus on God. No women, no anything like that. You know, I managed, you know, frugally. But my priority was to know God's will, you know, and to carry it out, to have the strength and the courage to carry it out. And I went, and it was an inner journey, and I just came to a place where I knew, well, I don't need to go to, it's not something really that is advisable for a lot of people, but for me, I didn't need AA or NA meetings anymore.
Right.
I hadn't outgrown AA or NA, but it's just that now that I had a relationship with God that was so profound and so constant, forever present, you know, I couldn't go wrong, you know, you know, with the Spirit of God with me at all times. How could I, you know, I cannot, you know, I didn't miss having a drink.
Continuous guidance.
Yeah, continuous guidance, and the temptations and all that sort of thing, or feeling insecure and so on, like a lot of alcoholics and drug addicts do. Even they haven't had a drink or drug for 20 odd years, they still go to the meetings every day, and that's because they don't have, a lot of them really don't have God in their life.
Well, ultimately, the love, you now replace the love that you were looking for from your mother and your father and your wife. You were no longer craving that love, I would imagine, because you now have the love of your ancestors, the divine, God. So that filled you, that filled that place, I would imagine.
Absolutely,
that void.
Absolutely. And I felt my grandma was very powerful, very strongly there with me. I felt her presence. I felt it in the cell in Wandsworth prison, actually. Yes, and I remember saying, Mommy, you know, because I felt it, you know.
Her there.
Yeah, and it's when I came out of the prison, it's afterwards I realized she'd passed away. So she actually visited me in prison to let me know she's no longer here.
So would you say that made you feel no longer lonely?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was not alone anymore. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tamara, for that. That was a really good summary and a good place to lead the reader in terms of, you know, your faith. Your faith brought you through. So if we could just ask you a couple more questions, for example, like your motivation for the book. Tell us a bit about your motivation for writing the book.
Well, I was motivated to write the book. In fact, I went to write a little short bio for an album that I created, which is entitled From Rehab to Life. And this short bio for the album was so compelling that I found myself driven again, the Holy Spirit taking dominion in my thoughts, words, and deeds, and I was just driven to write for 7 months.
Right.
You know, mostly at nights, and hence the book.
So could I ask you, going back to, if you were that child, if there were a child that were the same age as you when you were back in Dominica, and then you got brought over to England, and the way you felt, because that's when your initial abandonment came, the feeling of abandonment. If you could advise a child at that age to avoid, what advice would you give them to avoid them going down that route at all, if you know what I mean?
Well, I'd...
how to deal with those feelings, because ultimately that's what led on to all of the...
I would say find someone to talk to. Talk to someone about how you're feeling. If you can't talk to your mommy and your daddy about it, go and talk to your grandma, go and talk to your uncle, your auntie, a friend, anyone. Even talk to a tree about it. But find, you know, most of all, pray and talk to God about it.
Do you think it might have been
Ask
appropriate
God
for you
for
to
help.
Sorry, Tama. Do you think it would have been appropriate for you to tell a teacher? Or to tell somebody externally?
Even to tell a teacher, but at the time I was brought, I had so much pride in me, I was afraid to reveal anything to the teachers about how grotesque my life was at home. I felt ashamed. You know, I felt ashamed. I felt ashamed. I was encouraged to go to the police by my grandma. Go and tell the police that. But I didn't go. I didn't. I was, you know, I didn't want to go through all that. You know, I thought, no, how can I go and call the police on my dad? Although it's my life that's being, you know, mauled apart, you know. Yeah.
For those values.
And yet I was protecting my father, you know, whereas you need to protect yourself. So this is another thing to the children. Protect yourself,
And
children. Put yourself first, you know.
And this was part of the message that you wanted to convey to the reader when you and I had a conversation. You'd said, be honest with yourself.
Absolutely.
Ask for help when you need it. Find the courage. Pray. Have God in your life. Love yourself.
Absolutely.
Yes? So these were the things that, you know, you were saying before. So that ideally was the message, which is, you know, leading on from what Prolific was saying.
Yes.
So in what way, because, you know, we're coming to a close now, but just in what way would you want to inspire the reader?
Yes, inspire the reader. Never give up. Even though you can't see a light at the end of the tunnel, just keep on going. You know, have faith in God. You know, be of good courage. Ask for help. You know, be patient. You know, love yourself. To not stray from your positive motives in life, and you know, do not stray from the light. You know, just because the light is within, you know, it's an inner journey. So no matter what the circumstances may appear on the outside, you know, focus on the inside from the light within. External things like money and sexual exploits and all these things don't bring happiness. You know, put your health first. You know, love yourself, keep yourself out of danger, keep yourself out of trouble, keep yourself safe.
And you've said that a few times, love yourself. And, you know, to me, I'm hearing that is the most prominent thing, regardless as, you know, if you feel abandoned, you know, you are important and, you know, put yourself first.
Absolutely.
Self-preservation.
Absolutely.
The next book, the next inspiration.
Yes, the next book, next inspiration.
Born of Rape, possibly?
Well, possibly. The fact that I'd have to start it all over again because what I'd written, I don't remember it. I just remember probably the first sentence, not even that actually, precisely.
Well,
but
that title is really interesting. So I'd love to know what that book's about.
I'm really intrigued.
Born of Rape. That would be a very interesting book, I suspect.
Yes.
And community-based, what is it that you're going to be doing with the book now? You know, at the very last, talk to us about what you're going to be doing now in terms of promoting the book. And, you know, just, you know, your thoughts about developing help and support for people who suffer with drugs and alcohol problems.
Well, as far as the book is concerned, we'll be doing book tours. We're also hoping to do a weekly podcast. And also we're also promoting our book on the community radio stations and social media as well. And word of mouth.
So where can we access you? Where can people access information on when you're going to be doing your book tour, or, you know, where they can find you on social media, podcasts?
Exactly. Yes, but you'd have to go to our website, fromrehabtolife.org. I'm from rehabtolifefoundation.org. And however, I do need someone reliable to help me with that, to update the website every day, every week, or whatever, which isn't the case at the moment, you see. So things aren't always up to date as they ought to be. You know, we're still in the infancy as far as the charity is concerned, and obviously the right people will come along.
Yeah, absolutely. Tamara, thank you so much for being with us this evening. It was a pleasure to review your book with you. I know that Prolific and I were honoured to host you this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So audience, readers, from good night from us to you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. And I hope that you're going to be learning lessons from today, learning the messages, and hopefully you will then be able to move forward and be inspired. Thank you very much and good evening.